Thanks so much for joining us, guys. I'm Julia Schneider. I work on the marketing team here at ButterflyMX. In today's session, we're going to be discussing how to create a smart living experience for your residents and staff at your building through our new integration with PointCentral. So with me today, I have Cyrus Clockey. He's the founder of ButterflyMX, and I have Shawn Miller, who's the president of PointCentral. So on the agenda today, we're going to be talking about the trend towards smart buildings and go over some of the benefits and pitfalls of offering a smart living solution for your residents. We're going to discuss how to actually get started with providing a smart living experience. And then we'll discuss how the integration between ButterflyMX and PointCentral works. And finally, we'll do a Q&A at the end, but just a few housekeeping items. There's no need to take any notes or anything like that. We will send out a copy of the recording after. We do encourage you to ask questions. Just drop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the very end. So let's get into it. Cyrus and Shawn, thanks so much again. Can you each give me a short introduction of yourselves? Shawn, why don't you start?
All right, well, thank you, Julia, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're located. It's afternoon for some of us. I'm Shawn Miller, as Julia mentioned. I'm the president of PointCentral. PointCentral is a smart property automation platform. We're a subsidiary of Alarm.com, and we've been serving the residential property management space now for about 10 years. So whether it's single family or multifamily, short-term or long-term rentals, we develop IoT solutions that help turn those units into smart rental properties. Myself, the first 10 years of my career, I was in a bunch of different job functions, but the last 10 years of my career, I've been able to merge my personal passion for being a geek with what I do for work. So I started an IoT business at a company called Generac that connected our generators to the internet, and moved on to be the global director for Wemo, which is Belkin's home automation business unit. And then I've been running PointCentral now for going on 5 years. So leading essentially Alarm.com's push into this space and how do we make these rental buildings smart and efficient. Cyrus?
Hey, Shawn. Yeah, I mean, by the way, very happy to be here today. This is kind of part of a launch of our partnership between ButterflyMX and PointCentral. So kind of happy to educate folks on that, as well as some of the things that I think are around adopting either one of our technologies, whether it's our companies or other companies. Obviously there's a ton of interest in terms of how to make the buildings more intelligent, how to really kind of stay in step with the residents who are really living using their smartphones, property managers as well. So this is kind of an exciting opportunity, I think, for all of us to be educating the market. And so as far as my background, well, as you know, I'm the founder of ButterflyMX, which has been a terrific and fun ride. We're in over 6,500 buildings today, serving, tens of thousands of units and over 1 million residents. What most people don't know is that I actually started out in the real estate industry about 18 years ago, actually focused on designing whole building infrastructure design. So all that boring data stuff, but the in-building Wi-Fi systems, nascent home automation, as it was called back in the day. And so this has actually been kind of a secret passion of mine, and really glad to be here today to kind of, again, educate the market and tout our new partnership.
Thanks so much, guys. So let's get into it. Shawn, can you talk a little bit about the trend towards smart building automation? Where did it stem from, and how has it evolved more recently?
Yeah, so I think about 5 to 7 years ago, this sort of started in the rental space, in apartments in particular. I think it started focusing on sort of the resident amenity. And so there was a focus on, can we put a shiny object on a wall that residents understood, that got them sort of excited, maybe saved them a little bit of money, but then they just sort of helped add another line to the marketing bullet point of that building. I think, at least we think there's sort of 3 value drivers of IoT in these buildings, right? One is the resident amenity, one is sort of operational efficiencies, and the third is asset protection. So I think those last 2 weren't on too many people's radar at first, and we started to see them come in, but there was just so much more focus on the resident amenity at first. I think COVID sort of shifted that, but I think we'll get into that a little bit more, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves today. But yeah, I think it started with smart thermostats, a little bit of access, which I'm sure Cyrus can speak to a lot, but started to evolve. But it was really about how do you just make this easy for the resident, or something the resident gets excited about, was the primary driver at first. Cyrus, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's very much on point. Haha. And hoping to get a smile out of you, Shawn.
Thanks.
So, I think a few things have kind of driven this. So one is, obviously there's been a massive change in how all of us live our lives, right? We use the smartphone to control really every aspect of what we do, from the way we do banking to buying a plane ticket, once again, right? To watching videos and entertaining ourselves, right? So that's the first thing, right? Everybody's using these devices. And then part of that is, there's been this whole proliferation, I think, of services being offered to residents that require, building access or apartment access, right? House cleaning, dog walking, exercise classes, companies like Valet Living, Hello Alfred, and Menify all come to mind. So buildings have been trying to figure out, okay, how do we accommodate these services coming in, right? And then, not to mention, of course, delivery, e-commerce is through the roof, food ordering is through the roof, and I think all the money we didn't spend on vacations, we've spent on, ordering takeout, right? As probably most of us can acknowledge from, looking down. So, technology is really the only way to deal with that. So how do I create this seamless kind of package or food delivery workflow in my building, right? And that's something else that I think smart buildings can help solve, right? Or they're at least part of that equation. Then the other thing is the cost of building technology. Shawn and I have both been in this business for a long time. And, I think during the practice call, I just offhandedly mentioned, when I was doing home automation design, hard to keep straight with all the labels, right? With home automation design, 15 years ago, it would cost you upwards of $20,000, $30,000 to put in a budget home automation platform, right? Today, that cost is what, Shawn, $2,000? I mean, to put in a kit into an apartment?
Yeah, $2,000 to Cyrus probably gets you a pretty nice system. I think you can put in a basic system for under $1,000.
Okay, so there you go. Think about the drop in cost, and that's happening really throughout all the different kind of systems, sensors, software platforms, all of that, the advent of wireless technology. So in other words, my point is the cost curve has come down dramatically in order to be able to kind of install the smart building infrastructure, which is required to avail yourself of all these kind of services that we're going to be talking about. And then just to kind of emphasize the last thing that Shawn said, the pandemic has been this watershed moment, which has opened up a lot of eyes. And I think that that's basically just pouring a lot of fuel on the fire at this point in terms of technology adoption, smart building adoption in particular.
Yeah. Cyrus, I think you make a great point that, these little devices in our pockets, these supercomputers we carry around, have trained us over the last 10 years to be able to do whatever we want on demand. And a lot of the smart property evolution has been accommodating to that, at least from the resident amenity, like you said, whether ordering takeout or ordering the workout equipment to try and work off that takeout, or someone in to clean or walk your dog or a visitor, right? The reality is we want to be able to get people in and out or control something right from these devices in our pockets. And that's been a huge boost for, I think, the property automation industry or prop tech.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of underscore that point. So, at OpTech last week, I was talking to somebody and I basically said how good Amazon has been for our industry, right? For those of us kind of providing technology solutions to the real estate industry, because they trying to always be so hyper competitive and ahead of everybody, that kind of same day delivery has forced everybody else, right, to also provide kind of same day delivery. So it's kind of created the building out of this logistics supply chain for just in time and same day delivery, right? And that's, companies like DoorDash and Postmates and this and that, and now Fetch in our industry have really come to fore in terms of, servicing that competitive need to deliver just, at the moment when people order things, right? On demand, as you said. And so as a result, as a building owner, okay, how am I going to accommodate that? I need to deploy technology on top of my locker solutions, which have been great, all these past years, but like, people are ordering more and more and more. So technology is really the only solution there.
Thanks, guys. So I think both of you touched upon some of the benefits for residents, at its core, making life more convenient for them. But what are the specific benefits of this smart home automation for property managers, owners, and operators? Cyrus, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, look, once again, I think Shawn already touched on it, but I think it starts with energy management, right? Being able to hibernate a unit that's unoccupied, right? But then really it goes throughout the building. When you look at the building chillers, right? Using technology in order to bring down the chillers so that you're not paying peak power pricing, right? So adjusting your building common areas, right? As well as like all the PTEX in the kind of unoccupied units, and also maybe setting bands for how high and low residents can kind of set the thermostat, right? And having a central monitoring platform. Same thing goes with like leak detection. It's something that's very popular now, right? I think one of the things about leak detection is that one of the drivers is that insurance companies have a $25,000 deductible, right, for leaks in the building. So, when you start to do the math, one leak can basically pay for a heck of a lot of leak detection and kind of smart unit infrastructure. So I think the kind of the savvier landlords are like, hey, this is something I should really be looking at. I should really think about how can I deploy this, right? And then of course, things like self-guided touring, right? It was nascent, I think, before COVID, but because of the fact that everybody's leasing offices had to be shut down, right? But I still needed to get people in the units. I still needed to sign leases. Self-guided touring became really the only game in town. And it basically opened up people's eyes to, hey, you know what? This works. May not be the panacea that we thought it's going to be, but it becomes a very important tool that basically helps augment the on-site leasing team, right? And so I think things like that are very important. And then I think the other thing is too, I'll just touch on this, and this goes back to kind of resident lifestyles, right? Is that buildings are looking to cater to residents' changing needs, right? Smart, I think, building technology allows them to partner with some of the services that we mentioned, right? Without having to have a staff member at the front door escort those kind of service providers through the building, up the elevator, and into somebody's unit, right? And so that's really key. How can I kind of use third-party services to amenitize my building, to make it more attractive to prospective renters as well as current renters, right? Increasing retention, reducing turnover, right? Without having to kind of balloon my cost structure, right? So the smart building technology, at least, in kind of the access world that we're more focused on, really helps facilitate that. And, then we partner with companies like PointCentral to kind of really create that end-to-end solution that, allows service providers to get in anywhere they want to. So, Shawn?
Yeah, Cyrus, I feel like you just threw me a great alley-oop. I don't know if I have much to add into it, other than I agree with you. I think, some of these things you're talking about, like self-showing tours, thermostat control, those things were available 5 years ago. Some people were interested in it, not a lot, right? Most of them were that amenity. Then I think COVID hit and suddenly everyone was like, wait a minute, how do I get people in to do a work order? How do I know if there's a leak or a problem with an HVAC unit? How do I deliver all these boxes, et cetera? And so COVID sort of forced this very quick adoption of this tech from a different perspective, from the operator or the owner of how do I do my job? So how do I make sure my building doesn't get misused or overused in a time when I can't get eyes on things or handle things the way I normally used to? And Cyrus, you mentioned, being at MHC last week, I heard one operator say, these things have happened now, no one's going to go back, right? The reality is they understand these systems now. They've helped them be more predictive. They've helped them be more efficient. They've helped them be more flexible. I think that's a great point, Cyrus, whether it's, a resident who wants tech to help them age in place or, again, get their services or whatever the operator wants to take care of HVAC units more predictably. All those are supported by smart property platforms, and people understand these now, and now they're just trying to choose which ones matter for my brand or my specific buildings in which markets, not should I actually be doing this. Which is exciting. I think for anyone on this call who's involved in prop tech, whether as a consumer or as a provider, that's good for all of us to hear, because you know that value proposition is just clear now, and people understand what they want to do with it.
Thanks, guys. So obviously this sounds great. Having a fully automated building sounds amazing, but it also sort of sounds like a tall order. So if a building is at zero, let's say, how do they get started? How do they get in their foot in the door with making their building smarter, so to speak? Shawn, do you want to take that one first?
Yep, happy to, and I'll actually start from a comment Cyrus made at the end there. He talked about end-to-end access throughout the building. So we creatively call that curb to couch, but we think that access, that seamless access throughout a building, is one of the best places to start, because it solves so many needs. Again, whether they're residents who just want to let visitors in, or services, or people, on-site staff, or external vendors trying to do maintenance or check, letting someone be able to get in friction-free from that front intercom through a common area up to a resident unit is very impactful, and just supports so many use cases from an operator owner standpoint, that it's the easiest to start, or it's the clearest to start. And it's not, I think there's a misconception that it has to be really expensive, where everything in the community is a rip and replace. And I think the reality is that some components you may upgrade with new hardware, but a lot of times you can also utilize it. To Cyrus's point, combining systems like what we're trying to do allows people to have that flexibility. So it's not a, oh, how do I handle this or implement it? They can start easy at access and go from there. So I think that curb to couch access is the easiest point. And then from there, we've typically seen people think about HVAC. That's another one where, again, very clear to understand. They can see the benefits of it. Those two to us sort of make the base of a smart property platform. And then again, it gets built up from there as people build their comfort, or just want to try and serve different needs. Cyrus, what do you think? Do you think access is not important?
No, I mean, look, I think the interesting thing is, it's really one of those things of, you have to, I think, do a survey of what you currently have in place, and then try and figure out, is this something that I can upgrade, or is it a rip and replace, like Shawn said? I think the other thing, obviously, is you have to look across the spectrum of the assets that you have. How do things pencil out? Often these things are going to have, like a minimum 3-year payback, just kind of depending on the platform, right? So, do the economics of your property support that? I think one of the real interesting things is sometimes we like to look at how buildings with really very little amenitization can kind of sprinkle a little bit of technology on the property, right? And are able to now offer amenities. I mean, I wouldn't say it's comparable to the kind of the higher end buildings, but all of a sudden you can start to be a little more competitive, I think, in the market, because you're offering something that has a little bit of sizzle, right? Well, I think this is a real interesting question, because I think it also depends on the sophistication. So, I look at my asset type, right? How sophisticated are my consumers, meaning my residents, right? And then, at this point, are you kind of reaching out to any one of the consultants in the industry, really, right, to try and get some guidance from them in terms of what's the best way, the easiest path to upgrade my asset? Is there any kind of existing infrastructure in place, be it the door locks, the cameras, the Wi-Fi network, the in-building cell phone network, if you happen to be fortunate enough to have one of those, that you can use, right, as part of kind of the base for the plan to kind of redevelop at least the tech side of your property, right? So maybe, again, depending on how sophisticated you want, how deep you want to go with this, one of the things might be to just have a convo with one of the many different consultants out there in the industry, So, and obviously feel free to reach out to any one of us, for names of folks like that, but because I'm sure they'd love to talk to folks, and they can kind of tell you what's everybody else doing, what's competitive in your asset class, what's competitive in your market, what are the new technologies coming along that are going to help you operate that building more efficiently, whether it's saving on money, from the energy perspective, saving on operational costs, helping to deal with the package influx, which people just seem to be kind of, always at wit's end on. So.
Cyrus, on that point, I think you're right. There's, as this has become just well adopted, I think there's a range of consultants out there, but also just references that operators and owners now, the reality is so many people have done this, right? Still tip the iceberg, but enough people have done this at scale, at mass, that there's people out there I think any operator owner can reach out to understand what it is. It's not as complex as probably I think a lot of people fear, not as expensive, not as hard, and there's lots of consultants and references, professional references to reach out to. I think that's one of the best ways for people to start, as they're understanding, like, this is not a if I do it, it's when I do it. There's plenty of people that I think can help guide you on that journey.
Listen, I think that's a great point too, because then you probably want to like rank and stack. What's the most impactful? You know what I mean? Like, are you doing something in the amenity spaces? Are you doing something in the units? You know, I go back to that whole thing of like, you know, rekeying the door locks is such an expensive proposition. But I think like if you have the smart locks, then, you know, you don't need to worry about rekeying them. But I think just as importantly for things like the maintenance requests, you know, for building operations, and then also though from the resident side, getting in like my cleaning service, or you know, getting in my mom or whomever it is, right? So you have kind of value on both sides of the equation, on the building operations side as well as on the resident experience side, right, and the resident amenitization side. You know, and I think like what's really, really cool is, you know, as you're seeing with like, you know, now all cars are Bluetooth keys, right? You know, keys are kind of going the way of history, believe it or not. And so, you know, then I think smart locks are a really, really great place to start, you know, because it's so valuable from so many perspectives. Amenity space, again, you know, probably amenity space Wi-Fi, you're, you know, been in this business long enough to know when that was new, right? But, you know, now that's a basic. So what can you do in the amenity space, which is going to help the property show better, right? But, you know, as well as maybe offer some practical amenities for people who are actually down there using it, right?
Yeah, show better. And for some of the people on the call, they may have seen this. We've heard a lot as through COVID, as we're coming out of COVID, but just how difficult it still is to find on-site staff to do things, right? So just the efficiencies of these, because you don't have that body to do a tour or a third body to do maintenance or whatever it is. Not have, you know, now you can at least help your staff, you know, keep residents happy, keep themselves sane, and not feel the weight as much of those shortages in headcount that are there. So there's a lot. I think you mentioned, Cyrus, you know, survey your residents. I think if you survey your staff too, you'll see a lot of those overlaps between access, HVAC things. Again, why I think those are the first place to start, is they just serve all those constituents so well.
That's a great point. You know, it's the people in the field on the front line who are going to have great ideas. And as well, you know, I would just say, you know, as you've adopted technology, circle back to those folks. You know, how easy is it to use, right? You know, is it intuitive, or is it so unintuitive that like nobody actually ever uses it, right? That was always, you know, remember back in the day, you know, doing all these amenity space designs, and, you know, buildings would spend tens of thousands of dollars, you know, to do things, and nobody would use it, right? Because it would be overly complicated. And that's in part because of where the technology was 20 years ago. You know, and I think certainly the iPhone has changed all that, because it's raised the bar and kind of forced everybody to kind of design towards like an intuitive user experience and being very user focused as opposed to engineer focused, right? You know, that old saw, right? As we, but certainly I think it's really important to kind of survey the on-site staff, survey the residents, and get all that feedback on anything that you have tried. Hey, is this good? Does it scale across my whole portfolio?
Yeah, totally agree.
Thanks, guys. So can you talk about a little bit about the ButterflyMX and PointCentral integration and kind of what problem we're solving? And Cyrus, I'm going to ask you to start, and I'm going to ask you to give a short explanation about how ButterflyMX actually works, because we've had a couple of questions come in asking us to explain the access component. So if you could kind of weave that in, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I mean, so ButterflyMX is a smart intercom. And what does that mean? There's really kind of two main pieces to the puzzle. The first is there's a touchscreen at the front entrance of the building. It replaces your traditional telephone entry system. And if you've ever used a telephone entry system you're probably jumping for joy that there's something that can replace it. So it's a touchscreen. So think of like an iPad at the front of the building with a contact list, right? Just like on your smartphone, that contact list, you can scroll through it, you can search for people's names. When you hit somebody's name, it makes a video call to the ButterflyMX mobile app. Somebody can be anywhere in the world and they'll get a video call from the front of the building, see who's there, talk to them, and then open the door if they want to let them into the building. You know, again, because it's a smart intercom, what we've done is we've added a bunch of like functionality to streamline building operations. So if it's a delivery person, you can assign them a unique code that they type in when they get to the front of the building. No need to call anybody. If you have a dog walker or people coming to the building to visit the residents or on a recurring basis, you can send them our virtual key. And that's time delimited, meaning it only works from, let's say, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. and, you know, Monday through Friday, right? So you can really kind of box them in terms of when they can get that access. But again, no need to call anybody. So it's that type of functionality we've baked into ButterflyMX. And, you know, quick add, we're moving into the building with that kind of functionality and ease of use. So what we did with Shawn was, you know, PointCentral provides, you know, in-unit home automation platform, right? And I'll let Shawn kind of talk to that. But the idea is, you know, I'm using my home automation app. I have my ButterflyMX app. Let's combine that into one platform. So now in your home automation app, which, you know, you use to open the front door of your building, well, let's also give them that ability to control ButterflyMX by sending out the virtual keys, assigning pins, but also receive that video call, right? So you have one app doing multiple functions, right? And so that's really the heart of the integration. The benefits are obviously, you know, I think we've touched on some of these things. I have a cleaning service, right? So, well, now I can provide front building access via ButterflyMX in the PointCentral app, and also I can provide my unit access, right, in the PointCentral app to get that cleaner from the front of the building into the elevators. You know, we have elevator controls, so we get them upstairs, and then, you know, hand it off to Shawn basically to get them into the unit and do all the other things that they're doing there. So that's it in kind of a nutshell. And the value prop is by our two kind of companies talking together, we can have these seamless end-to-end workflows, right? Which basically, you know, provide a lot more convenience and security, right? Because it's all happening in one workflow. And of course, every step of the way, things are documented with a photo, time, date stamp, and most importantly, you know who's authorizing that access all the way from the front into the unit. So, Shawn, what did I leave for you?
Well, Cyrus, your last point that I think is really important for everyone. Again, one of the benefits I think of new modern cloud connected access systems is that knowledge, that event history, who did what when, and that allows people to understand, you know, to feel secure whether you're a resident or on-site staff. And so I think supporting that, one of the biggest things from our integration, I think, is that support, that seamless knowledge of who did what, when, and where. I think also, Cyrus, like you earlier in our conversation mentioned usability. The usability of these systems is important, and you and I have chatted a lot about, you know, apps, and you know, there's on one risk is you have 12 apps to do 12 different things, right? And so now we just have all these different apps on our phone. We're not sure which one does what. The other risk is you have one bloated app that tries to do everything, but it does nothing well, and you're scrolling through multiple pages. I think one of the nice things about our integration is it sort of tries to strike that balance of how do you help provide that highly usable, highly valuable, frictionless experience for a resident or staff to do what they need to do in one app. So if a building has the PointCentral system in the resident units and common areas and other things, with all our integrations to the PMS systems, then to be able to bring in the common BMX control. So again, that resident can easily themselves get from through the intercom up to their unit, let someone in, and that property manager understands exactly who did what, when, and where. That to us was the reason to do this integration, and what we're really excited about, that it sort of helps promote that one purposeful app that allows people to live the lifestyle they want and deliver on all the promises you and I talked about earlier in this conversation.
Thanks, guys. And I know we're sort of out of time here, so if people need to drop, no worries. We'll send out the recording after, but I do want to get to like at least 2 questions. And then if I don't get to your question, again, we'll follow up with you after. Cyrus, this one is for you. Are people using ButterflyMX as access control for amenity spaces?
I'm sorry, for what?
Amenity spaces.
Yes, so we've actually just launched that functionality in part because we're launching a self-guided touring solution. You know, we're on the front of 6,500 buildings. I think a lot of folks have come to us and said, listen, you know, you're at the front of the building. It's kind of where everything begins in terms of access to a building on a tour, on a delivery, what have you. So we decided we should provide something to the market. You know, in partnership with a company like Shawn Miller, we can get people into the apartments, right? But the amenity space is still kind of this area that I think is hard to get into because most existing key fob systems are not connected to the internet. So there's really no way to get people into amenity spaces real time in terms of access control. You know, we thought this would be a perfect area to kind of, you know, we're at the front of the building, let's extend in. Amenity space really made a lot of sense. So we now provide a keypad that allows both residents, you know, to get themselves in, of course, using your phone, or somebody on a self-guided tour, or, you know, there for an event, we can get them into the amenity space. And all of that is documented and can be done from one invite from the ButterflyMX mobile app.
Thanks, Cyrus. Shawn, this one's for you. How does the unit get installed? How are residents and on-site staff supported?
So PointCentral, we actually work with, we have a collection of vetted system integrators or service providers that are throughout the US. And so one of the things unique for us is we may meet someone and help them sort of understand what we do, but when someone actually is serious, we will involve one of these service providers that is in market, can understand the exact needs of that building, any local codes or regulations, et cetera, and actually do not only the initial install, but be there to support. So very rarely does something break initially, but let's say a thermostat was defective out of the box, that person would be able to replace it, but just think of the lifestyle going forward, right? So helping to support on-site staff as staff turns over, as residents want to add things like interior cameras or monitor life safety, such as aging in place or security or other things. This partners in that market can help support the needs of that building, which we think is really important because one thing we heard very clearly from operators and owners once they got over that hump of saying they want to do this is saying, I don't want to become IoT experts and I don't want my staff to become IoT experts, right? So we think that partnership we have with our service providers is really critical for the overall value the platform brings.
Listen, by the way, really good point. I think like you want to be partnering with a company that can provide not only an end-to-end solution, but really an end-to-end solution when it comes to implementation and training and all these things, right? So I think that's a really critical kind of factor towards success. You want to be working with a partner, not with somebody who's just purely as a vendor and very transactional. So super duper key, right? Especially as these systems evolve. We become your advisors towards how to kind of expand and add new functionality, right?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, Cyrus, we've seen a lot of developments around other questions. Again, whether it's a hardware tech, their connectivity, their solutions, all those, but you still having that partner that, you know, will hold your hand and not just worry about selling you one thing and then walk away, we think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that that's very, very key, right, to the actual long-term success of whatever you put into your building. You know, I think the other thing is that, you know, we're both talking to a lot of customers, a lot of folks in the industry, a lot of folks outside the industry, kind of coming in with new ideas and solutions, right? So it's really about working in partnership with our customers, right, with the outside vendors, and really coming up with solutions that provide value for the residents, as you know, many of the things we spoke about, but equally as important is kind of more on the building operation side, right? So that you're getting both sides of the coin there.
Great.
Thanks. Cyrus, this one's for you. You sort of answered this before. How can access be limited to make sure that it's not available to non-residents?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the way access control really works is that the residents, in the case of, let's say, the ButterflyMX virtual key, are the ones who can send it out to different types of people, whether it's a dog walker or their mom, right? You know, it's very important that anytime somebody's giving someone else a credential to get into the building, two things. One is it's limited in terms of the time and the number of days it works, right? And then it expires. Okay. The other thing is, because there's an audit trail, it kind of creates this great deterrent effect. If I'm a resident and I know that everything I send out in terms of virtual keys or pins will leave an audit trail, and that trail comes back to me, it deters me from being irresponsible in terms of how I grant those access credentials to other folks, right? But I think kind of above and beyond that, one of the very exciting things that we're working on now is, again, because we have this critical mass of the number of buildings we're in, we're actually working on partnering with delivery companies, with food service companies, with amenity companies, bringing in amenities for the residents, right? To create these automated workflows, right? Where only their employees who are pre-qualified can get into the property, right? And this is a way of enhancing the property's kind of amenitization without it going on to the budget of the building. But all of that is done in a very tight and controlled way. And all of it is audited. So again, that creates this deterrent effect in terms of people knowing that they'll be responsible for whomever they let into the building.
Thanks, Cyrus. And we'll do just one more. Shawn, this one's for you. What are the upfront and ongoing costs for PointCentral?
So PointCentral, earlier Cyrus asked me, the upfront cost tends to be less than $1,000 to start. To be honest, typically less than $600 to start with that HVAC, that thermostat, and access that resident door. And then from an upfront, and then there's a recurring that usually is around $10 a month for the software and services. That covers, in our case, it's cellular connectivity to all the units, so you don't have to worry about if there's managed Wi-Fi or community Wi-Fi or not. But then all the software integrations, updates, etc., that go forward from there. Then the upfront can change, if someone's looking to do more devices in unit, common areas, etc., that can sort of grow from there. But to Cyrus's point earlier, I think a lot of the shifts in this space, like the hardware cost has come down a lot. I think people sometimes will walk into a local Best Buy and think like, well, next year they'll really be lower, but that's sort of a retail cycle that in my previous life, if someone ping me, I can share lots of insight, but the reality is these devices are pretty economical today, especially when measured against the value they provide.
Thank you. So that's all that we have time for today. If I didn't get to your question, I promise we will follow up with you after the fact. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you'd like to get started implementing a smart living experience for your residents or improve the one that you already have, if you'd like to contact ButterflyMX, you can email us at sales@ButterflyMX, or you can give us a call at 571-480-6579. Again, that's 571-480-6579. And to contact PointCentral, you can call them at 888-532-3032. Again, that's 888-532-3032. I'll send that out after, don't worry. You can also just go to pointcentral.com. Just as a reminder, I'm going to send out the recording after, as well as the contact information. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shawn.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cyrus. Thank you, Julie.